The Soviet Union drilled a hole more than 12 kilometers deep in Siberia, which shares borders with Norway and Finland. The project to drill into the Earth's surface began in the 1970s, when Soviet scientists wanted to learn more about the Earth's crust. Over 2 decades, they managed to dig more than 7.5 miles down into the Earth. The drill broke through into a cavity, and the scientists lowered some equipment to see what was down there. An extremely heat-tolerant microphone, along with other sensory equipment, were lowered into the well. The temperature was about 1,100 degrees centigrade, about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But the real shocker was the disturbing sound that was recorded. They only got about 17 seconds of audio before the microphone melted, but it was 17 horrifying seconds of the screams of the damned. The screams of the hell.
The angel of God was buried.
When Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. And they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire. And all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants and princes, and all the women and little ones were there standing that day over them. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments which were upon them. And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords, and the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. And the Lord loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And the Lord came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained, and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with the Lord. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of fire spread over them, and they were burned, and 12 men of them died. And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire, and they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned, but the cord with which he was bound is burned. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. Burned, and the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Abram to be taken out from the fire, and his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was round about, and the flame ascending toward them from the furnace. And the king's servants fled from it, and the king rebuked them, saying, Make haste, and bring Abram out of the fire, that you shall not die. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out, and the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so that 8 of them died. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram, O servant of the God who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire, come hither before me. And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king, and he went forth from the fire, and he came and stood before the king. And when Abram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abram coming before the king, with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned, but the cord with which he was bound was burned. And the king said to Abram, How is it that thou wast not burned in the fire? And Abram said to the king, The God of heaven and earth, in whom I trust, and who has all in his power, he delivered me from the fire into which thou didst cast me. And Haran, the brother of Abram, was burned to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Casdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Abram. And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the God of the world who made you, and serve him, and go in his ways, for it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and spirits of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain. And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Abram was saved from the fire, and that Haran was burned. And the king gave Abram many presents, and he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of the one was Onai, and the name of the other was Eleazar. And all the king's princes and servants gave Abram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl, and the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. And Abram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him, and about 300 men joined him. And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Abram served the Lord his God all the days of his life, and he walked.
I am talking about the faith of the Bible. I am talking about the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Your faith must be like the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar built a tall gold statue and issued a new law. When you hear music, you are to fall down and worship the statue. The penalty for defying this law was severe. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. Daniel 3 verse 6. So when the music played, all the people bowed down and worshipped the gold statue. Well, almost everyone. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down and worship the statue. They loved and worshipped the one true God. Only he was worthy of their worship. The book of Daniel says that the Chaldeans, a group of astrologers and dream interpreters, took this opportunity to go to the king and tell on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel 3 verse 8 and 12. But not even the threat of death in a furnace of blazing fire could convince the 3 friends to renounce their loyalty to God. They boldly declared that God had the power to save them, and even if he chose not to, that is true faith. The faith that stands. This is real Bible faith. Real Bible faith is not saying, I know God will deliver me. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't know if God would deliver them. They didn't hear the voice of God. No angel had come down with a message. God had said nothing to them. The faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is the faith you and I need to have. The faith that will stand in any situation. The faith that will obey God in spite of circumstance and in spite of consequences. When the fires of the furnace came for the 3 Hebrew boys, their faith stood tall. True faith is saying God is able to heal me, but even if he doesn't, I still believe in him. True faith is knowing God is able to deliver you, but even if he doesn't, I still believe in him. True faith is acknowledging that God has the power to intervene in my situation, but even if he doesn't, I accept his will. True faith believes God is God, even when God doesn't answer our prayers the way we want him to. When the fires of the furnace came for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, God did not keep them out of the fire when they went into the fire. God did not send someone. He showed up himself. And today I have a message for you straight from heaven to tell you that God will be with you in the fire. The fire for you may be a sickness. The fire for you may be a divorce. The fire for you may be persecution. The fire for you may be a financial crisis. But rest assured, God will be with you. He promised you, I will never leave you. He promised you, I will never forsake you.
In this video, we will be looking at Daniel chapter 3 about the fiery furnace. This roughly takes place 23 years after King Nebuchadnezzar received the revelation of the great metallic image dream which spoke of the different world kingdoms. Daniel had interpreted to the king that his kingdom, along with all the succeeding kingdoms, would eventually be smitten by the stone kingdom. Yet Nebuchadnezzar, who was told to be the head of gold, sets up an image fully made of gold, perhaps in defiance to the God-given dream that his kingdom would fall. It would probably be an image of himself, as the deification of man was a common thing for kings and rulers. He made a decree that at the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, all were to fall down and worship the image. Failure to submit and obey this command would lead to a death penalty in the fiery furnace. We will see how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego remained faithful to God and refused to bow down. First, we take note of the measurement of the image that was set up. Its height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. The number 6 is impressed in the measurement. 6 is the number of man and the number of beast. The image of gold is used to worship a man. Is there some kind of relationship with the book of Revelation chapter 13, where we are told that an image of the first beast, speaking of the Antichrist, was erected, forcing mankind to worship it, and the fact that his number is 666. This will be explored. Image that was set up. Its height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. The number 6 is impressed in the measurement. 6 is the number of man and the number of beast. The image of gold is used to worship a man. Is there some kind of relationship with the book of Revelation chapter 13, where we are told that an image of the first beast, speaking of the Antichrist, was erected, forcing mankind to worship it, and the fact that his number is 666. This will be explored in future videos as we study the book of Revelation. But for behind the image, the answer is pride and idolatry. We read in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 to 14, how Lucifer fell because of pride. It reads, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations! For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation, on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." Take
A number of images and videos of what looks like a ball of light and gas went viral, with users claiming China had actually launched its recent experiment into the sky. One video, which has been retweeted over 20,000 times, pictures a bright light ascending into the air followed by billows of smoke, with a crowd of onlookers on the beach avidly capturing the moment on their phones. The posts have since been debunked, as they reportedly picture a completely different event, the launch of a Chinese rocket a few weeks prior. Snopes reports that the video is likely to be from a launch from Wenchang Space Launch Center in Wenchang, Hainan, China.
It is not debunked. It's real. Lucifer putting his light above God's.
Man has always worshipped the sun. It's perfectly logical, too, as the warm ball of light and heat sitting high in the sky fuels life on this planet by producing the equivalent of about 1 trillion nuclear bombs per second. Enough to power human civilization for 500,000 years every second. So, why has China decided to build their very own artificial sun? The need. Cleaner, better, more. It's no secret. The world's stores of subterranean fossil fuel stores are running out. The industrial age has seen an explosion in the global human population. And those people all need food on the table, lights on in the house, and be able to get from A to B. Burning coal pumps 50 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. And in such a relatively short time in our existence, we have effectively altered the climate of our planet. It's no small thing. There is an increasingly urgent need for a cleaner alternative to conventional fossil fuel-based energy generation. Wind,
how Lucifer fell because of pride. It reads, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations! For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation, on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." Take
And that's all, folks.